Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It's NMeade here. November 2020 is now in the books, which means we have a new month to review for world records. We have 7 new world records set in November for us to review today. Let's get started. Starting off this month, we had more activity on DS Yoshi Falls by David. At the very end of October, David started improving his own world record here and set a 58.714 on October 31st. Slightly over an hour after David set that run, entering November 1st, David would have a very sizable improvement of 50 milliseconds and setting the first 58.6 on DS Yoshi Falls with a time of 58.664. And 1 week later, on November 8th, David had another improvement, this time by 16 milliseconds with a time of 58.648. Starting off with the 58.664, David says that this was a much better run compared to the 58.714, but it still left a lot to be desired. David says the first half of the run was horrible, but the middle of lap 2 and onwards were very good. David comments lap 1 was once again an awful split, as he says he hits low 19.6 lap 1s pretty easily, so having 2 high 19.6 lap 1s in a row in his world record runs was a shame, David explains. At the lap 1 bridge, David had a wheelie nudge, losing a bit of time, and the waterfall sent him extremely wide, making David's main turbo and wheelie release very slow as a result. For lap 2, David said it had a really sketchy accidental re-hop on the first turn, along with another nudge on the bridge. On the plus side, the waterfall and the last turn lap 2 were near perfect for David. David explains he can release the wheelie a lot earlier than possible to hop onto the very edge of the last boost panel as David does on this lap, compared to what David usually does, which is approaching the bottom panel and hopping early to get a smallish bounce, which David references lap 1 and 3 to show the difference. David says doing this is far more inconsistent, but it can save a little bit of time if pulled off well, which was thankfully in David's case at the end of lap 2. Lap 3 was the best lap David has driven in a run at this point, with everything being very solid, but unfortunately had a 86 km/h drop wheelie at the end of the run, which held back a lot, which we can see the effects in the multi-ghost comparison between the 714, the 664, and the 648 right before the finish line. Despite this, David says this was a very nice split, all things considered. Moving on to the 58.648, David says this run is way cleaner than his previous runs. Lap 1 was a very nice split for David, with everything about this lap being very solid, and the waterfall, the recovery, and last turn being especially good, and feels this was the best lap driven in the run. Lap 2 was very unfortunate for David, as the first turn stick caused him to have to re-hop due to the poor angle, and the stick on the last waterfall, David estimates lost roughly 100 milliseconds combined. David says these were the only major mistakes in the run, but says these are probably the 2 most common fails for the track. David says this lap was very unlucky and a shame to have a split like this in the run, considering he normally gets low 19.5s on lap 2. Despite this, lap 3 was very clutch for David, being the fastest lap in a world record run yet on DS Yoshi Falls, clocking in at a 19.417 on lap 3. Seeing nearly a 19.3 lap in a DS Yoshi Falls world record run is nothing short of absurd, by the way. I never would have thought we'd be seeing laps like this, coming a very long way since Omega's 59-second flat world record set back in 2010, which stood for over 1,000 days. The waterfall was very nice for David at the end of lap 3, although he hopped slightly too early for the last turn and got a higher than usual bounce, which threw David off, but managed a nice recovery and thankfully lost no time from this. David says despite this being only a small improvement, he prefers this run by miles compared to his previous world records, because the time losses were due to unfortunate fails out of his control, rather than sloppy driving errors, with David referring to the previous 58.714 and 58.664 world records. David closes his comments for his improvements this month, saying he is far from satisfied here as of now. David says he knows he is capable of at least a low 58.5, but his goal remains just a 58.5 in general, as the track is far too inconsistent to expect the run where everything goes swimmingly. With that said, David will be taking a break for now, as he says he's put a lot of effort into this track over the lockdown periods, and that will certainly be a well-earned break. Awesome stuff trying to push the bounds further here with the improvements between both October and November, David. Congrats once more and good luck on your future attempts when you decide to give this one another go. Next up, we head to some glitch activity over on Mario Circuit. We had big developments here during November, starting off with Justin getting the world record on this track for the first time. Justin beat Dez's previous world record by 196 milliseconds on November 10th, with a time of 48.747. 4 days later, on November 14th, Logan reclaims the world record here since his last record here, getting the first sub 50 second on Mario Circuit glitch back in March of 2019. Logan's new time is an improvement of 353 milliseconds over Justin's record, with a time of 48.394. The spark of activity on Mario Circuit in November came from a brand new glitch strategy discovered on lap 1 by Justin. This new strategy skips clipping the tree on lap 1 like in previous records. Instead, the clip is performed on the vertex between the mountain and the brick wall on the left hand side. After ascending, you hit the finish line pole and fall straight down through the brick wall, through the floor, and land inside the tunnel. Justin says this new strategy saves around 1 second, and is only faster at the very beginning because when you turn around from the starting line, you travel a shorter distance to where you do the new strategy, compared to the older tree clip on lap 1. As for laps 2 and 3, when approaching the glitch, you are facing towards the line rather than away from it. So the distance you need to travel for the standard lap 2 and lap 3 setup is faster than going for this new strategy all 3 laps. Justin says he is glad he found this new strategy on Mario Circuit, since he's been keen on finding as well as implementing new strategies for years. Justin has innovated several strategies into RTA runs that originated elsewhere, but this strategy marks the first time Justin actually found a new strategy and implemented it into a run, let alone a world record run, Justin explains. Justin says the drop down from the pole was discovered several years ago and happened to be trying to pull this off clipping the left side of the task strategy tree that's used in the recent world records here. Justin said due to experimenting on the left side of this tree, he was able to catch a detail with the vertex between the mountain and the brick wall on the left hand side as previously discussed. Justin said he actually never noticed this detail prior, so he became intrigued about clipping that vertex and doing the drop down with the pole that way. Justin would end up getting a clip very quickly and went over the invisible wall, but missed the pole. As soon as Justin went over the invisible wall, Justin said he knew it was possible to pull this off. And sure enough, he ended up pulling off the new strategy a few clips later. When it comes to the execution of the new strategy, Justin says the way it works is pretty simple. You have to direct the analog stick to the right even before the clip. That way you are able to hit the pole. Justin explains he missed the pole by either holding right too late or by clipping at a bad angle, or a mixture of both, and hit the pole but slide to the right onto the main road by holding too much right or clip too low, in which the invisible wall prevents you from reaching the pole. In order to hit the pole, you need to go over the invisible wall first. When you hit the pole at the right spot, your speed drops completely and you start falling straight down. Since the top of the brick wall has no collision, you fall straight through it. So that means there's no horizontal wall shenanigans being involved like an N64 DK's Jungle Parkway glitch for comparison's sake. And you land inside of the tunnel, which sets you up perfectly to continue driving normally. Justin ends his explanation sharing that this new strategy can be consistent. Once you get it down, it's just as difficult as the task glitch that's done on laps 2 and 3, maybe easier. Justin believes a 47-second time will be done here relatively soon. And Justin says as a tradition, he wants a clever name to be written for this new strategy, like the other numerous methods for the glitch. For now, there's no distinctive name for the new strategy besides the quote-unquote new strat, and Justin wants you at home watching this to help come up with a name for it. So let's see what we can come up with in the comments below. What an exciting sequence of events for yet another faster strategy being discovered for glitching Mario Circuit. I feel like there has been at least 5 separate strategies to glitch this track that have further lowered the time to be over 30 seconds faster than the no glitch record now, including clipping off of different trees on either side of this road right before the finish line, to doing those clips no stop, to the task strategy being implemented into RTA runs, which is what Dez's record does all 3 laps, and now arriving to where it is now with Justin's innovation this month. I discussed this in the September review video this year, but massive props to Justin for being at the top level of time trial across all tracks and categories, yet also being so heavily invested and intrigued in innovating new strategies and techniques for both glitch and no glitch categories, even across both regular tracks and the custom tracks in the game. Congratulations on your feat here, Justin, and good luck to you if you end up trying to grind this down further in the future. Heading over now to Logan's improvement after Justin's record this month. Definitely no surprise that Logan picked up this new strategy right away and was able to successfully execute it and have quite the sizable cut to the record here. As mentioned previously, Logan was the first person to sub 50 seconds on Mario Circuit glitch, so Logan already had prior expertise of doing the normal task glitch on all 3 laps. So it was just a matter of de-rusting and adopting the new strategy for lap 1. Logan says this new strategy is faster by at least 1 second, also confirming Justin's thoughts as to roughly how much this saves for runs now, and Logan says this glitch is actually easier for him. Logan says that lap 1 splits can potentially go down to 19.5s, with Logan explaining he's hit 19.8 second lap 1 so far. Logan explains the highlight of this run for him was lap 2 because it was a best known split by 2 milliseconds, saying it was only a new best known split because of the landing from the first task glitch. Logan says he definitely wants to try for a 47 second time here, but predicts Dez will take control of the category if he gets the new glitch strategy down. Logan also says that Justin doesn't get enough credit for how much stuff he's finding, mentioning Justin also found a new N64 Bowser's Castle shortcut that could be implemented into a fast lap and 3-lap world record runs, deserving a lot more credit, and I definitely agree. With Logan reclaiming Mario Circuit in November, Logan reaches his newest peak of holding 7 world records at once. Throughout the game's history, it seemed unlikely that anyone would ever venture to the double-digit number of world records held at once after Fox's massive dominance a few years ago. Luke was eventually able to break into that echelon, and even with that, we are now approaching potentially 2 players having double-digit world records at one time, which has not happened in the game's history so far. So big congrats to successfully implementing the new strategy and reclaiming the world record here, Logan, and best of luck when you decide to take this one down further in the future. Speaking of new shortcuts on N64 Bowser's Castle, there's been some exciting developments during both November and now December for that track, with potentially the first N64 Bowser's Castle glitch world record on the horizon very soon. Once that feat is accomplished, I plan on making a video on the history of glitching that track in real time, just like the one I made for GCM Waluigi Stadium a few months back. I still feel that video is my best edited video and had immense help from many community members, making that video as great as it is. I'd highly recommend giving that a watch during this month in anticipation for the next one coming out, with N64 Bowser's Castle inevitably being done very soon. Next up, we head back to some more no glitch activity during November, this time on DS Peach Gardens. A new standard has been reached with King Alex's improvement in November. King Alex becomes the first person to sub 159 on DS Peach Gardens on November 14th, making a substantial cut of 111 milliseconds over his previous world record with a time of 158.986. DS Peach Gardens has had quite the history of strategy changes, from spear manual drift to spear automatic drift, back to spear manual drift, and then back to spear automatic drift again through the course of DS Peach Gardens world records. The first sub 201 happened in the beginning of 2009, and the first sub 2 minute time happened in the beginning of 2010. And now over 10 years later, we arrive to the first sub 159 happening on DS Peach Gardens, and it's hard to believe this was possible to be done, especially for spear and automatic drift, or the pace lock of the chain chomp and the hedge maze on lap 3. It seemed like Alex was going to leave where his previous record of 159.097 stood after setting that back in May of this year. Alex says he had always imagined how incredible it would be to get this sub, but it was never something he realistically expected to get, nor chase after. Alex says he is usually hyped yet pretty composed after a world record, but when he crossed the line and looked at the time, Alex says he thinks it was the first time playing this game that he was genuinely stunned by utter disbelief. Something had to be wrong. Did he misread the digits? Was he hallucinating? Was this a prank? The game actually letting him hit his potential? Alex explains that he was very happy with the 159.097 when it was set, but a small black cloud of doubt hung over his head due to Brett's buffered 159.043 run, and because he wanted to hit his potential once and for all. Alex wanted to finish a run very close to the chain chomp on lap 3 with a chain before it, along with a strong back half to the lap, particularly with a proper final turn. Alex says he wanted to essentially beat Brett's 043 and call it a day, sub or not. Alex's 097 was fairly close to the chain chomp, but dropped the chain to avoid exiting the maze very wide. And other than getting an unlucky staircase stick on the final turn, it had a very solid back half. That last turn stick though. Alex says his hatred for that unlucky stick and the 097 grew over him the past few months, questioning why couldn't he have just had gotten a stair clip. Fast forward months later and being back in lockdown, Alex discusses Carter B's rate of improvement here scared him. Alex said he doesn't care much about holding a world record anymore, but it kind of lit a fire under him to assert himself and at least try finishing what Alex started. This last push was about finally seeing out his potential for once in this game, along with passing the time during lockdown. I asked Alex about the different way he went along doing the shrooms in this run compared to his previous runs as well. Alex said for obvious reasons, doing the shroom this way saves a very slight amount of time to spend as much time in a wheelie as possible. Alex says the old and still very viable shroom method drops the wheelie and turns for about half a second into the shroom, whereas clearly not in the boost or in a wheelie. That small fraction of time is what's saved, assuming you don't bounce at the top of the hill or get a bad chain wheelie. Alex says double 39.5 laps is freaking ridiculous, with lap 3 being a best known split as well. And a 39.8 lap 1 isn't exactly free, with the chain chomp lap 3 adding another layer and Alex's inability to hold insane paces together. Alex says he always knew if he had miraculously subbed, it would be with one so-so lap and two incredible ones, rather than three consistent great ones, for example being a low 39.7, a 39.6, and 39.6 pace. Although getting to the chain chomp on perfect pace is a difficult challenge in of itself, Alex says he has had much better paces than this entering lap 3, all of which ended in failure or one of his many 159.1 or .2 runs he has completed because of nerves, needing to slow down or work around the chain chomp, or the incredibly janky bufferless flower hop after the hedge maze. With a below average lap 1 of 39.871, Alex knew he could go all out for the rest of the run with little fear of needing to waste time to avoid the chain chomp. Alex believes that the human limit with automatic here, using the current strategies, is probably a mid to low 158.9, explaining further that it's probably possible to be a few milliseconds closer to the chain chomp lap 3, and says this run lost a bit of time with his last average dirt path exit. Although he's not surprised or disappointed that the exit was the only significant time loss. It's definitely the hardest turn to do consistently while calm, let alone when nervous. And had Alex started turning even a few frames sooner, Alex says he could have very easily crashed into the fence given the angle. Other than that, there is very little juice left to squeeze here. Insanely close to the chain chomp lap 3 with a chain wheelie, with a very solid driving after, a lucky stick after the hop, no final straight random bounce, and the godly 98 km/h full speed stair clip. This run along with the QM and his driving are obscene and says it's more than he could have ever asked for. What an epic feat accomplished here, Alex. Your grind here has paid off in the best of ways. For a very long time, it didn't seem like anyone would be able to quite master the automatic drift strategies and rival Brett's expertise here. This is definitely one of the most impressive subs around, especially for the fact of how close to the limit the record is now at this point, without any new strategies being discovered and implemented. It must feel so relieving to hit a standard you know you're capable of in the end. So massive congratulations to you, Alex, you've greatly earned it. Last up for November, we had some more progress on GBA Bowser Castle 3 No Shortcut by Luke. Picking up from October, Luke had a 54 millisecond improvement on November 16th, setting the first 2:16.5 time for this category with a time of 2:16.564. And on November 29th, Luke had another sizable improvement of 50 milliseconds, narrowly missing the first 2:16.4. setting a time of 2:16.514. Starting off with Luke's 2:16.564, Luke says lap 1 had average low jumps, but the strong driving made the lap, especially the last turn that ended the lap. Lap 2 also has some nice driving for Luke, but unfortunately missed the fourth low jump. Luke estimates this most likely lost around 130 to 150 milliseconds, but the double chain wheelie and driving saved the lap. And for lap 3, Luke says this lap was going really well with having some nice low jumps and a really nice drift ramp. The shroom was good for Luke, but said he sadly messed up the line into the last turn, causing it to be wide. Combined with the wide line and the half chain wheelie on the straight, these factors caused a 2:16.4, but it was still good enough for a nice improvement here. Heading to Luke's 2:16.514, Luke says the improvements are becoming all the more difficult. Lap 1 was pretty good for having a full chain wheelie and a half chain wheelie, with the driving being clean with no noticeable errors. Luke says the lows were overall average, with the third low being the only good one he had for lap 1. Luke's lap 2 in this run is his personal best lap 2 split as of setting this record, and only the second time he's hit a 45.3 lap on this track. The driving was clean but not perfect for Luke, notably the fifth turn which could have been tighter. The low jumps were pretty good for Luke, but knowing the only perfect one was the last low jump being the most important one. The last one in particular is the most important as it's after all the other islands leading into a straight before the next turn. So the earlier you land from the last low jump, you can get the biggest advantage being in the wheelie for a longer period of time. In contrast to the island lows, the wheelies are cut a bit short before each island, even with the perfect ones. The second low was also good, but the others were either bad or average for Luke. Apart from that, very solid driving plus the perfect double chain wheelie at the end made this a very strong lap for Luke. Lap 3 sticks out like a sore thumb and is very sad to look at for Luke, he explains, as nerves were very high entering lap 3 understandably, pointing out the fourth turn where he had to counter drift slightly, but that didn't lose too much. The lows, however, were very bad for Luke, unfortunately not getting any good ones, and Luke explaining this is why this lap is over 200 milliseconds slower than lap 2. And you can really see this in the Ghost comparison with how much Luke truly did lose, and this is why I like to point this out whenever we have improvements here, for how deceiving the low jumps can be when watching back a run. I definitely think by the time we hit a 2:16.4 here, it's going to be almost mandatory to get at least 2 to 3 really good low jumps per lap, along with executing the chain wheelies among everything else to get an improvement. Luke says the other time losses for lap 3 were the high drift ramp as well as a small wheelie nudge on the final straight, but thankfully nailing 2 perfect chain wheelies to save the lap and the run. We can see how there are differing degrees of the drifting low jump which have been recently implemented into Luke's runs. I'd estimate that a perfectly timed drifting low jump saves anywhere from around 25 to 50 milliseconds per lap compared to a perfectly timed turning wheelie trick, with that estimation maybe being a bit conservative perhaps. Luke says he never thought this track could be pushed this far, from the previously long-standing 2:16.684 Havoc set back in 2017. and now knocking on the door of 216.4 territory today. Luke's goal is still a 216.4, but says he's trying hard to resist changing it to anything further, but only time will tell. Impressive improvements as always, Luke. Congratulations on both records for November, especially with the 216.514. Salvaging the previously unfortunate 216.618 record that had the wheelie drop right at the line that would have been a 216.539, as discussed in last month's video. I could only imagine that beating that threshold may have been a tiny thought looming around during attempts, knowing that is what the record could have been without the wheelie drop. And now you have at least beaten that with a 216.514 now. And best of luck with your future attempts here. With November 2020 in the books, we are officially at 95 world records set thus far in 2020, still averaging nearly 9 world records per month from January to November 2020. And with all that said, folks, we are now in the last month of 2020 for Mario Kart Wii time trials. 5 records separate us from breaking triple digits for world records set in 2020, which would be the 3rd year in a row it's been done after a 4-year decrease in activity from 2014 to 2017. I'd recommend watching the video I made at the beginning of this year, analyzing and reacting to all the world records as of January 1st, 2020, and see how much has been done throughout the year. I'll be doing a video like that at the beginning of 2021, next month, and I look forward to doing that and predicting what 2021 will bring for the Mario Kart Wii time trial scene. Thank you all very much for watching as always and supporting the channel. We have more videos in production currently that will be coming to the channel very soon, so be sure to subscribe to keep up with the latest video uploads and leave a like if you enjoy these types of videos and want to see more on the way. Thank you all once more, and I'll be seeing all of you in the next video, where we will review the world record activity for December 2020. Take care.